All right, welcome everybody to the Rebels by Design Wrestling podcast. This is episode number 11. We are here with a very special guest. We have former WCW and WWF wrestler, promoter, and currently co-host of In the Ring Wrestling podcast with Kevin Kelly. We have Casey Thompson on the line. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to have you here. So, being that you got the chance to work in both the WWE or WWF at the time and WCW throughout the '90s, what was you said the biggest difference between the different locker rooms?
Um, when you went from WCW to the WWF locker room, the guys were more at ease at the time. Wrestling was down then, especially in I think I've had my first match 1988, 89 or 90 with WCW. And my first WWF match was in 91. A couple things that stand out. Excuse me, the catering in WWF was so much better than WCW's. I remember going back and forth to like different buildings and stuff. I remember one time we were in WCW, we were in Perry, Georgia at the Georgia State Fairgrounds. And I was walking out of cater and Mike Rotunda was walking in and he's like, "What's the food like today?" I'm like, "Oh man," I said, "it's the best we've had yet." I said, "It's a big southern restaurant called Sonny's Barbecue," and it was Sonny's Barbecue catered it. And he's like, "Oh, let me get up there." Went right up the elevator. But the main difference was a lot of the guys were the same. Could they go back and forth and stuff? Is this guys were more comfortable at the WWF at the time? They're not as much pressure and stuff like that as in their money and things like that. So they're a little more comfortable in things like that. So that was the main difference I noticed besides, ironically, the catering.
So, I always like to ask this question as well: is what got you into wrestling? Like, what made you say, "Hey, I want to actually do this"?
It goes back to my parents were really big wrestling fans in the 70s. And we're from Michigan originally, so they used to travel the whole circuit before I was born, and my brother was born in the Sheik's territory in big time championship wrestling. So they go to Coble Hall, they hit the whole circuit all over the place. Ended up time I was in late elementary school, we moved to Florida, and this time we were in southeast Florida in Fort Myers. And they were watching, and I never knew they watched wrestling back then because we never watched TV growing up in Michigan and Illinois we lived, but down in Florida we did. And they were watching old, I think it was the Madison Square Garden Network. They were watching old WWF wrestling, and this was probably 82, 83. And I was like, "Oh, this sucks." And I'm like, "Oh," I just went to my room. And then one Saturday afternoon, there, Championship Wrestling from Florida was on with Gordon Soley, and Dusty Rhodes was on it, and Blackjack Mulligan, and Dusty started talking, and Jack started talking, and I was hooked. That's what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it's funny, you think a lot of parents would discourage their kids, like, they never did. They were very supportive of it always. So my first matches I went to were at the Lee County Civic Center for Championship Wrestling from Florida. I remember Dusty Rhodes wrestled Abdullah the Butcher.
That had been wild.
In the main event. Barry Windham wrestled Cowboy Ron Bass for the Florida title. Mike Rotunda defended the Southern title against Angelo Mosco Sr. I think Mike Davis, Mike Graham were on the card. There's the Ambui Express. It was everything I watched on TV. And I started going to that building over and over. And I got to know the guy, Gordon Nelson, who used to set up the ring.
Oh, wow.
And actually got to know him pretty well. And I used to help at like 11 years old. I would help Gordon Nelson set up the ring. My dad would drop me off early at the building, like at 2:00 in the afternoon. I would be there to help set up the ring. And then that was back then. They had promoters in the territory. So this Fort Myers was Coach John Heath. He's an an Olympic wrestler.
Yeah.
Coach John Heath, it was his territory. So Coach John Heath would actually send the posters to my house eventually, where I would poster the town for the matches and everything. So I went in there, and then I'd help. I'd ring the bell sometimes. I do a lot of different things like that. So that was my first step into wrestling. And I told Gordon I want to be a wrestler. He said, "Oh yeah, okay, all right, cool." Never smartened me up, never, told me anything. I'd get in the ring a little bit here and there, just mess around. And I ended up moving up to Orlando, where I was in late middle school, maybe about ninth, maybe 10th grade. I was 15 years old. There was a poster at our school saying it was independent wrestling, an indie show that was across the street at the Central Florida Fairgrounds. And at the bottom, it says, "Learn to become a pro wrestler."
Oh.
And I was like, "Dad, this is it. I can do it." Because we talked about it prior to about where and how to become a wrestler and stuff. So I went there at 15 years old. My dad used to drive me to the training, and I started training. I actually trained for one whole year before I had my first match. And my trainer was an old territory guy, wrestled in Florida, wrestled out in Don Owens in Pacific Northwest for Jarrett in Memphis. His name was the Golden Boy, Jerry Gray.
Yes.
So he and then he was in a tag team with another guy, buddy, my real good friend of mine to this day still, Bob Cook. Under the mask, they're the Mighty Yankees. They beat Steve Kern and Mike Graham for the Florida tag team titles. Jerry Gray was who trained me. And, he has, sometimes it's a bad rap, training, I'm not training people well and stuff. He actually invested time in me. And actually he lived 2 blocks from me where I grew up, and he had a ring in his backyard, a big 20 by 20 ring. So he'd call me, "Hey, what are you doing?" He talked real soft, fast. "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He's like, "Want to train?" I'm like, "Yeah." I got on my bike, would ride over there, and we in that ring for hours at a time. So it was a great experience. I got to learn. And then he was the promoter for the shows too. So he put me with, after I got going and got off, had my first match, got off my feet, started learning and developing. I was kind of married to an old timer named Bugsy McGraw. And Bugsy, I'm still really close friends with him to this day. He's 80 years old, sharp as a tack. I was just with him a couple weeks ago, spent a lot of time with him. And, Bugsy sold out Madison Square Garden with Bruno. He's been in the business since the 50s. So that's who broke me in the business. He taught me how to throw a forearm. He taught me how to cut my, color, with the razor blade and all that. He taught me all that stuff. And then from there, I moved on and did some stuff in Blackjack Mulligan, which was one of my heroes growing up. Blackjack had a school at the old Eddie Graham Sports Stadium. And I became really good friends with Jack, and I started training all of his guys and everything. We'd travel, wrestle on the same shows and everything. And then also Kevin Sullivan was a very big a mentor of mine until the day he passed. We were very, very close friends. And I would go down as I got older. I would go down to South Florida, down to Isla Mirada in the Florida Keys, where he had a big house there. And I was staying in his guest house and, just travel with him. We traveled all over the place. He was the booker in WCW when I was there. And I went out to his place out in Washington, out in the Willoughby Islands, and, stayed with him. So, I had all these great mentors that helped me in the business. So, yeah, that's how I got my start. And, I'm fortunate to do things that doesn't exist anymore these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Bugsy McGraw, because there's a fan fest that they're doing in May here, which is it's being promoted by Herb Simmons, who's a guy who's been wrestling in the wrestling business for 50 years. A lot of the old school talent are coming through here because he's all about wrestling the Chase and Sam Mushnick and all these guys. And he announced that he's going to be here for that fan fest. So, I know that name real well because he's going to be
excellent. Yeah, Bugsy. We do a legend lunch in Florida every about 6 weeks in Tampa.
Right.
And all the boys, since only open to people in the business or a guest with someone in the business. You could be a referee, a valet, promoter, a wrestler, and so I went and actually Bugsy lives about 2 hours from me. I went and picked him up. I drove him the 3 hours to Tampa, and we went to the Legends Lunch, drove him 3 hours back and 2 hours back home. But it was what an experience. It was like watching the History Channel in live with him,
right.
just asking all the questions, a big Q&A the whole 6 hours in the car. And he remembers everything like it was yesterday. He has a better memory than I do. And at the Legends Lunch, you have it's hosted by Mr. B. Brian Blair from the Killer Bees. You have Ronnie Garvin was there, former world champion. You have Jerry Briscoe was there. Jody Hamilton was, Jody Malenko, Jody Simon, which is Dean Malenko's brother, their father, the great Malenko. Bob Cook, the Cuban assassin who wrestled, Ricky Santana, a bunch of Steve Kern, all the Florida guys. A lot of guys live in Florida.
Yeah.
And then this particular one had Wendy Richter was the honoree and Lonnie Kai. So it was a lot of fun, and you get to see. And then one of my buddies that wrestled for WCW, been close friends ever since, Joe Gomez. Yeah. He came out just to hang out with me and Bugsy and everything. So, we get together about every 6 weeks, and we have one in the beginning of May. And so we're looking forward to that, getting all the boys just get in and we just BS and tell stories and eat and have a good time,
It sounds like a blast, I'll be honest. I love hearing like the old school stories about, traveling up and down the roads and how it was back then compared to what it is today,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm an more old school fan than New Day in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was the same way. I wrestled my whole all my years that way with that mindset.
Right, because I'm in St. Louis where wrestling at the Chase was like the biggest thing ever. So
there's the St. Louis was the that was the main office for the National Wrestling, the NWA National Wrestling Alliance. So there's so much history with the NWA there and everything. So it's and Harley Race was for St. Louis, I believe, too.
Yeah, he had.
Or no, he's until he passed Kansas away. City or no.
He's from Kansas City. He had a wrestling school until he passed away. I think his son takes.
Oh yeah, I've been out there. This was years ago. He had a school. That's when Trevor was first starting.
Yeah.
I came out myself and D'Lo came out to wrestle for him, D'Lo Brown. And we hit Chicago the first day, and did that the next day.
Yeah.
So, but he was a great guy. I would talk to him because Blackjack used to tell me all the ribs he used to pull. He was like the worst ribber out of everyone. He would literally take his 357 and shoot at your car when you're driving. He would ram you off the road. He always rented a big Cadillac when he came into town, and he would just to chill people. So I was telling Harley about it. I'm like, hey, I'm really good friends with Jack Mulligan, and he was telling me about all the ribs you pull. How he's like, whatever Blackjack Mulligan told you, he says it was not true. Those ribs weren't. He says they weren't that bad. They were worse. So he would even he said they were. When when in WCW he was there, and he had a hand taser, and he was tasing all the boys in the ass all the time, like zapping them when they weren't paying attention. And we're leaving the bar. We're in Atlanta. It was called we call it the Dungeon, where we stayed at all the time at the hotel. And the old Ramada, they had a bar downstairs and everything. You've heard the stories about where Sid got into it with Mike Graham and all that. It's all this is the hotel bar everything happened at.
A very famous place.
I was going up to the room one night, and I seen Harley like leaning against the elevator doors, all just hammered. And I'm like, looked around. I said, I have to do this. So I'm like, bing, hit the button for the elevator to come down. About 15 seconds later, because I was on the first floor, so I was walking. I heard the ding for the doors to open. And all of a sudden, you hear, bam. Harley took the bump, took the big face bump. But to be able to get back and rib the biggest ribber ever in wrestling, was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because Harley had a school here for until he passed away, and then now his son
Yeah.
took it over, which is
Okay.
WLW, World League Wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. World League Wrestling. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they partnered up with the current version of the NWA with Billy Corgan, I believe.
Right.
So, so
Yeah.
I also want to ask you because obviously WCW and the WWF had different styles of rings. They had the
Oh
bigger
yeah.
20 by 20. WCW had the 18 by 18. How hard was it to
Right.
get used to the different styles of rings, the different sizes?
You know, it's funny. I do a lot of podcasts, and we are talking about that at one of the podcasts I did the other day. And one of the interesting things I find is that everyone talks about how WWF's ring was so hard back in the day. And I'm like, what? And they used to say WCW's was soft. No, WCW's ring was hard as a rock, because it's a wooden base ring,
Yeah.
like the old time ring. So it's not steel where it has all that bounce and give. WWF back in the day was a 20 by 20 steel ring, and the wood they used was the wood they used for the platform were plywood that was fiberglass,
Right.
and then some padding and everything, and then the ropes. Now, and I found it to be so much softer than the old hard wood ring, which took great bumps. It was just stiff,
Right.
and so you don't think an extra 2 foot when you're running the ropes from 18 to 18 to a 20 by 20 would make a big difference, but you have to get in there first and realize, get your timing down from rope to rope, from corner to corner, because there's an extra step in there.
Yeah.
So um, that was the biggest thing. I've seen many guys go in there and couldn't work in the rings because it was too much bigger. But in WWF, the way they do it is when you set stuff up is the rings in pieces. So you split it in fours, and that's how you work in the ring too. Like in WCW, if someone has you in a headlock, you're backing up to the rope to shoot them off for a shoulder tackle. Well, in WWF, you don't do it because you're backing up a couple more feet, and it just doesn't look good. So you give them a couple flippers, and then you shoot them off from right where you're at in the middle, and then you come up to them and meet in the middle. So there's a lot of adjustments that had to be made. And if you knew what you're doing, it's not the hardest thing in the world. And if your conditioning was already well, you're not worried about it. But yeah, you can definitely tell there was a difference in that 2 foot,
Right.
from an 18, because most independent shows were 16 by 16,
Yeah, he's smaller.
you know? Yeah. So it's a smaller ring. Pretty much all indie shows are 16 by 16 because they use smaller buildings. So they need the smaller ring to get into it and stuff like that. And so it's the same transition when you go from a 16-16 to 18 by 18 on TV. You still got to do that thing, because when I'm hitting the ropes on a 16 by 16, I might take 2 steps to the other side. And an 18 by 18 ring in WCW, it was 3 steps to the other side of the ropes. WWF, you had to really take some big steps to get across,
Right.
So, but yeah, it was a little bit of a transition. But if you knew what you're doing, you were already conditioned, you could figure it out. It just takes a couple seconds to get in there for 5 minutes beforehand, just to get your timing down. It wasn't that difficult for me. Some people, it was very difficult, and you can see when they run and have all those small little pitter patter steps and everything.
Yeah. I remember hearing stories about it took a while, even though he worked in it previously before. I think it was Rob Van Dam had a lot of issues adjusting to WWF ring. Thinking he was working in the ECW for so many years, so he used that smaller ring. So
right, and you have to realize that WWF doesn't use cables for the ropes; they use real ropes.
right.
So when he's doing his springboard and a bunch of stuff like that, there's a lot of different changes you have to learn to adapt to and everything. Plus, Robbie always took smaller steps. Anyhow, I always had a big stride. He took smaller, faster steps. We actually worked a handicap match in WWF against Sid Vicious, or Psycho Sid, in WWF.
Right.
Probably around 92 or 93. And Sid You can the match is on YouTube, and it says Matt Burns was his ring name, and I was Mike Casey at the time, and that was we both were in blue tights, and ironically, we looked like we were a tag team, and um, and it was a handicap. Sid, threw power bomb him on the stretcher, me on top of him, all kinds of stuff. And Rob talks about it just recently. He's been, discussing a lot on different podcasts and his stuff and everything. And then afterwards, Sid came up to us and was like, "Hey, listen, I know it's not a lot, but I was right here, but after I wrestled you guys, I'm up here now." And he won the title right after it. And he gave us both $20 each and said, "Listen,
Wow.
I know it's not a lot of money, but just to get you down the ring, get a drink, get a meal, I just want to show my appreciation," which is huge because guys didn't, a lot of the guys didn't show your appreciation to you. They were like, "Oh, thank you," but you had guys like Vader that was just an asshole,
Yeah.
that didn't care if he hurt you or not, would take liberties with you if you get away with it, So for Sid to go out of his way to throw us a little money on the side to show his appreciation, it was a big thing. It was really cool. Believe it or not, Sid was a really cool guy.
I've heard, especially since unfortunately he recently passed away. But I heard a lot
Yeah.
of stories about how genuine nice he was to a lot of people, like people who couldn't really afford a hotel room. He would help them get a room,
Yeah.
get a place to sleep,
Yeah.
and just hearing all kinds of
He
stories
would
like
always,
hearing those
yeah,
stories
he would
like how
always,
genuine he was.
yeah, yeah, he definitely was. And he would always try to help me. Like, he was always Harvey Whippleman in Downtown Bruno. That was
Yes.
his boy. And and Bruno could remember every phone number right up here in his head. I mean, like, "Hey, give him such and such's phone number. Oh, it's this number, 901, this, that." He didn't need a Rolodex or anything. They're all he knew every phone number in his head. And Sid was like, "Yeah, call them. Tell them if they need to call me for a reference. I got you covered. I'll get you there." He helped me a lot, get me to a lot of different places, wrestling shows and stuff like that. So he was a good guy. He was a genuine. I mean, guys had their problems with him, but I didn't have a problem with him. He was always really. I mean, I wrestled him a lot. I took a lot of bumps for him, and I called him couple of years before he died. And I'm like, "Hey, man, I think about you every morning." He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Every morning I get out of bed, my back hurts, my organs hurt, this and that from all those whirly birds and power bombs." And he's just laughing. "Oh, man, don't tell me that." I said, "That's all good, man. That's what I signed up for. So,
So you being the WCW was known at the time to do a lot of, I call them block TV tapings, where they had
oh,
a
yeah,
lot of different TV shows. And it was like before
they're
Nitro,
syndicated a lot.
so they had they had like Saturday Night Main Event, the Pro, the Main Event. All these shows that mostly aired, at least for me, aired on the weekends. It was like
Okay.
4 shows on the weekends, like a show that aired around late morning, early afternoon, like around close to noon, and like another one having like prime time on TBS.
Right.
And I know you worked a lot of those kind of shows as well. Did you have a situation where like you worked like multiple matches a day? And if so, what was it like to be able to go out there, get all warmed up, and get going? Then you had to stop, get cold, and then try to warm yourself back up again.
Yeah. So when I started, we do like, we do Monday, Tuesdays. So I came from Florida. So we'd drive up with David Penzer. He ended up being the ring announcer.
Yeah.
So Penzer would get a van, WCW pay for the van, and he'd go all the way up the turnpike and stop here to pick up, say, Bob Cook, and then drive further to another 30 minutes or an hour and pick up this bird, pick me up in Orlando. And we work all the way up to Atlanta, and our call time is like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And a lot of times the first day was in Atlanta at Center Stage, studios, which everyone's heard of Center Stage, the horror stories about that building. And then from there, the second day we would go 250 miles is how far they to go. It was within 250 miles we had to drive for the second day. So it could be Dothan, Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. It could be Perry, Georgia. It could be Anderson, South Carolina. Within the circumference of 250 miles, that would be the second day. So, but you go in there and they have like 40 matches, So you might wrestle twice, sometimes just once. But in '96, when the Olympics came to Atlanta, the Olympic Games, they had to pack up everything and move to. That's when they moved to MGM, and they used MGM's production, their camera guys, because all the camera guys were taken up for the Olympic Games.
Right.
So, and then they had so many syndicated shows back then, like you were saying, but they were going all over the world. Shows I never even heard of. That they were syndicated for. So they would wrestle. We would do 3 weeks every 3 months down in Florida. And we would do some 3 to 4 tapings a day. So and luckily for me, it was good buddies with Kevin Sullivan, which was the booker.
Right.
So he introduced me, it's like his staff was Paul Orndorff was his assistant. And Paul's like, he introduced me, he's like, hey, Paul, this is my boy Casey. And then Terry Taylor was on the booking staff. He was the matchmaker. So he's like, Terry, take care of Casey. He's here to work. So put him out there to work a bunch. He's like, all right. So that means the difference between WWF and WCW was WWF paid you one time for the day.
Right.
WCW paid you for every match. So I'm wrestling 3 or 4 times a day. So that all adds up. And then he had Jimmy Hart was there. You had Mike Graham was the finish. He called all the finishes. He's calling 100 finishes in a day, And then you had Arn Anderson also was part of it. So they took care of me because Kevin told them to, so I was on. And then Paul was like, you're from Florida, right? I'm like, yeah. And Paul was very, very intense. Like he wrestled in the ring was like he was in real life. Great guy, just very intense. He's like, hey, how about you get me some guys? I'm like, yeah, no problem. He's like, I want to make sure they're good. They know how to wrestle. They're good Christian guys, good attitudes, this, and that. I said, got you covered. He's like, I'm just going to call you from now on when I need guys. Everything goes through you. I'm like, all right, whatever you want to do, I'm here for whatever you need. Right. And so they took care of me for that too and everything. So, but it was cool. So I would wrestle a lot. And so our first taping, say, is like at 10 o'clock. We get there. I'd usually get there about 7:30 in the morning, because you got to get there and wait for the run sheets to come out and the boards to be set up and all that. So I get there and see which tapings are on, because usually they come out for the whole day. And so going to what you're saying eventually is, so say I'm on the first taping, I'd have to get all warmed up, stretched out and everything. And then I'm not on until 2 tapings later, or if I'm on every taping, I'd have to repeat that process every time to make sure that I didn't pull a muscle, hurt myself. I had to get warmed up. I had to put your hot stuff spray on, your baby oil, everything, every single time. So it could be 4 times in one day I had to repeat that process. But I was getting paid. I was getting paid well, again, because of Kevin Sullivan. So I didn't complain. WWF was the same way. They had all the matches, the 30, 40 matches. You might be first match and last match. You just had to get ready, do it, just repeat the process. Get ready, warmed up, ready to go, do what you got to do. Even if it's a 2-minute, 3-minute match, if you're not warmed up, you go to hit those ropes, you're going to pull something, hurt something, and then you're out and don't make no money. So you always made sure that you were prepared and ready to go when you hit the ring.
So this is kind of what you kind of relate to both companies. So who were some of the people you liked working with, and who were the ones you did not like?
Well, I can tell you who I didn't like to work with was Vader, Big Van Vader. He was just an asshole. Just any way you look at it. I only know one person that ever said anything good about him. That's my co-host on my podcast, Kevin Kelly.
Right.
I'm like, seriously, Kevin? you know, yeah, Vader didn't care about anyone. He didn't care to protect anyone. He would just put you in the corner and throw those big haymakers and just every time he hit you, you see, bam, like it was a cartoon, seeing those big stars and everything. And yeah, I actually we were at Universal one day, and I guess I got to tell the story. So the word was going around that Hogan's going to wrestle a television match,
Right.
which Hogan never wrestled television matches, especially in WCW. So everyone was talking about it, the big buzz going around. So I'm thinking, I want that match. How can I get that match? Let me think. I'm like, okay. Hogan had his own referee, Randy Anderson, Pee Wee Anderson. Rest in peace. He's no longer with us. So I went to Pee Wee. I'm like, hey, Pee Wee. I said, is it true Hogan's working television match? He's like, yeah. I said, man, I love to have that match. I said, how do you get that match? He's like, I don't know. I said, well, I'll give my payday for that match. He's like, seriously? I said, swear to God. He's like, no problem. He says, it'll be you. So the next day you come in, the board's up. It said Hulk Hogan versus Casey Thompson. And everyone's like, whoa, how'd you get that match? I'm like, I have no clue. I was just playing dumb, kayfabe and all of them, and like everything in wrestling, they rewrite it at the last second. So they're like, oh, listen, we changed what we're going to do. We're putting Hogan with Savage against Roma and Orndorff in a tag team match. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm off this hour. And they're like, don't worry. I'm still getting paid. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go ahead of my bag. I'm going to try to sneak out and try to, go and get some food or go in the park for a little bit. And I was like, one step out, and Terry Taylor's like, hey, where you going? I'm like, oh, nowhere. He's like, oh, we got you a match. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, who you got? He said, we got you against Vader. I'm like, all right, great. I wrestled the guy so many times on television. It was crazy. So I went from potentially wrestling Hulk Hogan
right.
to being off to have to wrestle Vader, the biggest asshole in the company. All right.
Right.
So I go out there, same thing. It's 3 minutes. He's out there just clubbing me, and you can watch the video. My hair, when he punches me, my hair was just growing. It was just growing. He was like tatering me left and right, and he had me real close into the corner, so I couldn't bump or anything. All I could do was go down to my ass, and I wasn't going to do that because then he was just kneeing me in my face, broke my orbital bone or broke my nose or something. So I wasn't going to put myself in that situation, right?
Right.
So we got to the back after the match, and I had enough. I was done. I was over it. I was tired of what he'd done to people. I've seen him break guys' necks. I've seen him break guys' noses with no remorse. Didn't care. He broke one of my buddy's noses at center stage and looked at him and said, you'll be all right. He's laying on the ground bleeding.
Right.
He was just a jerk. No one liked him. So we get to the back, and we're in like one of the staging areas. I'm waiting on him now. And David Penzer and another wrestler named Nasty Ned Brady were back there. We're the only ones. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I can't take it no more. So he came back and he's like, I said, bro, what's your problem? He's like, and this is the time that no one talked to Vader like that. Everyone was kind of in fear of him, right? He had that reputation as a badass, right? So I said, what's your problem, bro? Well, what do you mean? I said, you need to learn how to punch. I said, this business is a work. You're not supposed to be trying to kill people out there. I said, you're an asshole. I said, you never take care of anyone. It's all about you. You don't, protect people with your punches. He's like, well, I just put you over with Flair. I said, I don't care who you put me over with. I said, I don't need your help. And I was just like, you know what? I got my bag. I was going to hit the door because he's going to try to kick my ass or whatever, right? And I said, screw it. I'll leave my bag. I'll just go. And I said, I'm going to get fired. I don't care. I'm done with it. I just, I was at my breaking point.
Right.
And he's just like, put his head down, like, just mumbling. I'm like, and he just walked away. And they were like, oh my gosh. Ironically, a couple of weeks later is when he smarted off at center stage to Paul Orndorff, and they got into it. Orndorff knocked him, jacked his ass up. So I really hated wrestling Vader, but the guys I like to wrestle, I wrestled a lot of the I got to wrestle a lot of the cruiserweights, or they were cruiserweights in WCW. I wrestled Chavo, Eddie. I mean, all those guys, Dean Malenko. I got to wrestle Jeff Jarrett. I wrestled Alex Wright a lot, many, many times. And we were both young kids at the time. They just put us in there, I think, because we always had really good matches. I wrestled Jim Powers a lot too, which Jim was like, "Oh, Teddy wants me just to not give you nothing, but I have to because I'm a baby face. I got to have a comeback," because he was big about the comebacks and everything. And so, I mean, guys like that. But when I really think about it nowadays, I like to think about the guys who are legends in the sport that other guys have never wrestled. Like I got to wrestle Abdullah Butcher on TV. And actually, he got disqualified. I won the match, which was cool. I wrestled not in WCW, but I wrestled Blackjack Mulligan's last match ever.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium, which was like an iconic building in the state of Florida. Absolutely. So I wrestled his last match ever. I got to wrestle Mike Graham. I wrestled all these legends that, one, they're not around anymore, and two, you know, people like I wrestled Legion of Doom. That was my first match in WWF ever because I was riding up with two of my buddies. We all three started together. They were booked on it. And so I'm like, well, they got a free car, free hotels. I'll go up there, just go for the ride, try to get on. If I don't, you know, it's not costing me anything.
Right.
So it was a double shot. It was Pensacola, Florida, and Biloxi, Mississippi. So the first day I went up there and nothing for me. The next day we're in Biloxi, and Tony Grillo's like, who can do Legion of Doom's finish? Who can do Legion of Doom's finish? I'm like, I can do it. He's like, all right, well, you're going to wrestle Legion of Doom. I'm like, I'm not even booked on the show. He's like, you are now, kid. I'm like, okay. And soon he walked away. I looked at my buddies. I said, hey, what's Legion of Doom's finish? I don't even know. And they was laughing. They're like, yeah, it's a Doomsday. And the clothesline off the shoulders. I'm like, oh, okay. I was confident in what my abilities were. I didn't worry about it. But I also like to add a little extra to it. And they're like, listen, it's like playing chicken in the pool. I'm going to go under your legs. I'm going to give you a little iggy on your calf when I'm about to lift you up. When I'm about to lift you up, just do a little calf raise. It'll pop me up on the shoulders. And then Animal will come off the top, or Hawk will come off the top with the clothesline. And then we'll push your legs up and you'll do the flip. They say, you don't need to do anything. I'm like, okay. So me, I'm going to do something extra to make it a little special. You know, that way, you know, when you do an enhancement work, you try to do something to set yourself apart from everyone else. So right. I pushed off Animal's head and I did 1, 2 flips and a third landed on my belly. Oh. And it was good. I mean, people were like, whoa, it was on the sizzle reel going into SummerSlam and WrestleMania that year. So after that, I got booked for them all the time because they liked it. So, I mean, I got to wrestle Legion of Doom. I mean, all these legends, Sid so many times, you know, Dan Spivey. I mean, you name it, I pretty much, you know, Steve Austin, you know, so
who's who?
All these guys. Yeah, exactly. You know, all these guys, and, you know, a lot of them aren't even around no more. Those opportunities aren't there. So, I mean, I used to wrestle another legend, a tough guy in the business, Dick Slater, Dirty Dick Slater.
Yeah.
You know, I got to wrestle Dick Slater a bunch, you know, Dick Murdoch. You know, guys like that. I got to be in the ring with Dusty Rhodes and do stuff. I'm one of the few people in the business who has wrestled all the Armstrong brothers along with the Bullet, Bob Armstrong.
Oh, wow.
You know, so, you know, I find myself to be pretty fortunate in what I've done. So it's hard to just pinpoint one person. As I get older, I think it's more, when I look back on what I've done in the business, it's about all the legends and people like that I've wrestled that no one's had the opportunity to. So, you know, it was special. It was a fun time in my life, you know.
I can only imagine because like you mentioned so many like the who's who of professional wrestling as we all know it, you know, and then
Yeah.
to be able to look back like, hey, I got to get in the ring with all these guys. I mean, and not a lot of people can say
Norman
that.
Berry, yeah,
And
Flair, all of them, man.
yeah, and like I was guys you named like they were big stars here too because they came through
Yeah.
the NWA was such a big deal over here as well. So like you're the same
Oh, yeah,
guys were
this is
like
the hub.
yeah.
Right.
So I was like to hear those names like yeah I know all those names because they came through here as well and um I really always really interested to hey I got to work with these guys. You know?
Yeah. See, I never got to wrestle Harley Race, but Harley managed two people I wrestled. He managed Big Van Vader,
Yeah.
and then he managed Hercules Hernandez when he was wrestling under a mask as Invader. And it was like a little thing they were doing. And Herc was all nervous because he was getting another shot. He needed the business, he needed the money and stuff like that. He was real nervous. His kid was there, and I'm like, Herc, don't worry, I got you covered. I said, if you, he was just such a nice guy. He's like, I'm like, listen, if you forget what we're doing, I got it. I remember everything. I got you covered. We're good. And so I was like, hey, Harley, why don't we do this where her could do something, clothesline me over the top. I'll be out there for you. And then why don't you do something to me? And he's like, oh, you sure, kid? I'm like, absolutely. Why wouldn't I? When a legend, one, multi-time NWA world champion, when
Right.
the title actually meant something, a
Absolutely.
traveling champion. Of course, I want to do something with you. So, and afterwards, we did some stuff. He was like, was everything okay? You were good with it? I'm like, absolutely. Of course I was. So I got I had all those opportunities that just don't exist anymore.
Right.
So it was cool. It was fun.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine like, hey, going to something like Hard Rock's like, hey, I want you to do something to me. Like just bring it,
Yeah.
and to be able to say, hey, he did it too, and it had to feel good, like you're always making it look good and all those things like that.
Yeah.
So you told me you also were, you've been a promoter and a producer. So tell me about
Yeah.
those experiences. Like,
Um, my son was born in 2003. I had to go out of the country a couple days later, and I was just miserable. I'm like, screw this. This sucks. I don't want to do it no more. It's like taking a needle and popping a balloon. I didn't want to be there.
right,
I was a new father, and so I seen how so many guys in the business there had no relationships with their kids because they're on the road all the time. I was on the road sometimes over 300 days a year. So how am I going to be a father when I'm not home?
right,
Even if I cut back to say 100 days a year, that's 100 days more than I want to be away from my kid, right?
right.
So I came back and said, I'm done. I'm just going to be a father and work a real job. And so uh, about a year later or so, an opportunity presented me where my brother-in-law knew this guy who wanted to he was working with another wrestling company, and he wanted to know, he was like the money man. He wanted to know my opinion about it. So he wanted to meet with me. So I met with him, and I said, this is what you're going to see at this show. You're going to go there. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. You're going to see this. That's going to happen. This is how it all should be done.
Right.
And I explained him the difference and everything. He's like, all right, I'll call you tomorrow. I'm like, all right. He called me. He's like, yeah, let's meet again. Let's go to lunch. I'm like, okay. Went to lunch. He's like, everything you said was to the T. Exactly what you said would happen, happened. He says, I know what you're saying, why your way is the right way, the better way. He's like, why don't we do this ourselves? And I'm like, oh, man. He's like, I talked to someone else, which happened to be a buddy of mine, D'Lo Brown. He's like, D'Lo would be interested in it too. I'm like, okay. So we got together, we started it, and he's like, listen, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do TV. I'm gonna invest the money into it. So he's like, first thing is we need to have a company that's been around for at least 5 years. That's the magical number for for TV industry to be interested in you because you have uh, you've been around for more than just a minute. You're
Right.
not fly by night. So D'Lo's like, oh, my buddy has a company up in Michigan and Canada. We could buy it off them. They've been incorporated. They've been around. It's called Maximum Pro Wrestling.
Heard it.
Scott Demore was involved in it, and so we bought MXPW, which we got the belt, we bought the ring, we got all the equipment, everything. We bought the trademark, everything we bought. So we bought the corporation. So we started doing TV. We started doing some TV tapings, and boy, D'Lo, he was wrestling at TNA at the same time too. D'Lo was bringing every TNA guy in the world in. And I'm like, man, this is not going to work. I said, TNA's not drawing. We're not going to draw either. We need to develop our own guys, use sprinkle in some name guys and stuff like that. So we did another big show, had Dusty on it against Barry Windham in a bull rope match. I mean, New Jack Sandman, um, um, Swing Diamond, Johnny Swinger, Simon Diamond, Conan, Disco. Um, you go down the list. We had every Shane Douglas, Raven, D'Lo. I mean, every Chris Sabin, AJ Styles. Everyone was on it.
Right.
The biggest shows. So we were doing another show. The next taping, I'm like, he's not going to show because he had a booking and he's just D'Lo just disappeared and went away. So I said, all right, I'm restructuring everything. We're going to use the top talent that's here to keep our expenses down. We're going to sprinkle in guys. So I used Norman Smiley, friend of mine, Chaz from Mosh from the Headbangers. I used Gangrel in Luna. I used Dennis Knight, which was Midian or the Godwin.
Yeah.
So, but they all were in Florida, and New Jack was one of them too. He lived in Tampa, so they all were my mainstay name guys. I'd bring in one guy here or there, but so I went from having $6,000 in flights to having no flights. So now it makes it where I can turn a profit better.
Right.
So I we ran shows at all the old Florida buildings like the War Memorial, ECW ran there, Florida Championship Wrestling from ran there. So we did that, and then we started shooting the TV. We ended up being on the Sunshine Network and Fox Sports. Then we syndicated on a lot of UPN affiliates. We ended up going out to our reach. There's about 53 million people. So, but I was the one man show. I was booking it. I was writing it. I was editing it. I was promoting it. I was doing everything. The only thing I didn't do is I never wrestled in any of my shows because I never had the ego. Like most guys that run shows, they're going to put themselves on there and make themselves the champion. I didn't ever wrestled on a single one of my shows. And all I cared about was having a good product from A to Z, from top to bottom. That's all I cared about. And we did. We had a good product. We had a nice run for 2 years. It played at chorus. We got out. But yeah, talk about 60, 70-hour weeks, writing it, producing it, editing it, everything. I had to edit every Thursday night to get it out, to have it out, for the TV for Friday. So it was interesting. I learned a lot by doing it. It was very time consuming, but it was another part of my wrestling career that I don't regret at all. Because I learned so much about behind the scenes of the industry.
It's funny you mentioned that company because here in St. Louis actually got that show. Because through our the sports package that we got had at my mom's house had every Fox Sports channel available, including the Sunshine on that. And during that time, it was like I call it the wrestling power block.
Yeah, we had Puerto Rico, Impact or TNA, and us.
MOW was there for a while too.
Oh yeah.
So I watched all those shows in a row because it's like All right, cool. Professional wrestling, one after the other, different companies.
Mm.
So I'm like, this is really fun to watch. So
Yeah. And
those shows.
we kept it basic. We didn't do nothing crazy. Our production was what it was, but we were a lead in for SmackDown in one of the UPN affiliates in Monroe, Louisiana. And the station manager called me, he's like, I don't know what you're doing. He says, but your ratings are better than SmackDown's ratings. He said, your lead in is better than you're their lead in and you're getting a higher rating than them. He said, but we kept it old school, nothing crazy, very, very basic. I don't like you. You have a problem with me. You try to steal my girl, this or that. And that's how we did it. And a lot of guys developed from that.
Right.
You had a kid, Ryan O'Reilly, who was with he went to the Deep South and then he made it to the main roster with the um, Legion of Doom 2.0 kind of his name's he's in TNA now, Kong. Um, and then you had MVP. He came from there. He was one of my guys. I helped break him in the business.
He's still
So
going.
and then yeah, and there were so many other guys that wrestled, and would use my tape to, try to get themselves a job. And back then Tommy Dreamer was in the office in WWE, and he'd call me and be like, "Hey, I got the tape for one of your kids." I'm like, "All right," and I would tell him, "Yep, that's he's a good kid. Do something with him and that." So it's uh I was never the kind of promoter that would try to hold people back. You have a lot of promoters. If you work for me, you don't work for anyone else. Or you don't work for him. I didn't care. My job was if I got you to the next level, that just makes me look better to not only the crowd, but to all the other people wrestling. I'm a desirable person because
Right.
I hope my boys get to the next level. So everyone's going to want to wrestle for me.
Absolutely.
So that's how the mindset I had.
Which is like probably one of the best mindsets I've heard from people because the other I had heard Simmons on one of my shows. He kind of talked about kind of iterated almost the same mindset of how he approaches the talent. Always be
Right.
honest with them. Always be you know take care of them. Make sure that they got what they need to get to the next level because it makes everybody else look better.
Absolutely. And I was because we'd get there, for TVs early in WCW and WWF, we had like a 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock call time. So you're sitting there because the show doesn't start till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So
Right.
we're sitting there. And so I used to sit out in the arena and watch the load in, watch them set up, watch the lighting, all the little behind the scenes things, right? Sometimes I would sneak into one of the, you know, um, talent meeting, booking meetings when they're going over a production meeting, going over all that stuff. So I was learning all those things, you know, you know, went to my guys, okay, you know, let me know what you're doing, something special in the match. I'll make sure that the truck is there, the camera guy, I'll be in the truck and I'll tell them, hey, this can't, you're about to have a big move. So be ready, get your shot ready and everything. I did all that kind of stuff, to try to make it. So what I did is I took the perception of what my company was and try to make them feel like you could walk into WCW, WWF, or you could walk into MXPW and it's going to be the exact same feel, the exact same. You're going to be, you could, you get trained the same way. You can walk in, plug yourself in anywhere, the same concept. You
Right.
walk in, we had a catering that was buffet for the boys the whole day because they had to be there early. So
Right.
I did everything you would see on TV or they would see. A lot of guys never had the opportunity to go be a part of that.
Right.
So this was their only chance of what it was like. So that's what I emulated all the time.
Well, this is a really good thing in a way that kind of prepares them what like to do. A WWE show or whatever major company there was around the time because this was probably after
Yeah.
WCW did no longer exist after
Nope.
2001.
It,
So you had a
I
now you have at that time it was WWF or WWE at the time or Impact. Or the only thing was really
yeah.
on Worldwide,
Ironically,
probably.
it was only back then. It was called the name of my TV show was MXPW Maximum Extreme Pro Wrestling. I just do Maximum Pro Wrestling, but
Right.
the name of my show on TV was Sudden Impact. Believe it or not.
I remember
And
that.
then years later, they become Impact. And um, yeah, I remember uh, a friend of mine, Billy Gunn. We knew each other before either one of us got in the business. His buddy Foster owned a gym. My buddy Chris owned a gym, and Chris and Foster were buddies. So
Right.
we'd all go to lunch before. I was the young one too. I was 15 years old, so we go to lunch together, and then we wrestled, trained by the same person, wrestled all that. So and then his wife is one of my best friends for years and years and years. We knew each other before, I got in wrestling and all that. So um, when he got released the first time from WWF, I gave him a call. He's like, "Yeah, I can't wrestle for you yet." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because they consider your program to be more than regional. So because my outlet was so big, he had that 90-day no compete." So it was cool that at least they thought of me and knew who I was,
Right.
to where, he said they mentioned your company by name, that they knew who you were.
Oh,
So
nice.
it was kind of cool.
Absolutely. I mean, that's gonna make you feel good. Like, hey, I'm being recognized at this level at this point.
Yeah.
So, getting into your own
Mm-hmm.
podcast, how did you become friends with Kevin Kelly, and decide to
Me
do
and
the
me and Kevin's known each other for 30 some years. Back in Florida, he's from Florida too, and he was doing the play by, he's the commentator for Eddie Mansfield's promotion, IWF.
yeah
That was the original Soundstage 23 at Universal Studios way back in the day. And Blackjack Mulligan um, was their champion and ran a school that, trained a lot of their guys. And I did all the training for Blackjack
right
at the school. And I was wrestling for WCW at the time. And Jack's like, "Why don't you come and wrestle for us?" I'm like, oh, because Eddie Mansfield, he exposed the business and a lot of guys hated him still to this day. And I'm like, listen, I said, I hear the rumblings. I hear Flair talking about Mansfield. They all hate him. They want to kill him, all this stuff, right? He's like, I said, I'll wrestle, but I need to put a hood on. He's like, no problem. I said, okay. So I put a hood on, and Kevin was the commentator there. And, he got the job in WWF,
yep
and, we just knew each other. Our paths had crossed so many times over the years. We've been friends. We talked to each other and stuff like that. When I ran my promotion, he came down and he was one of my original, him and Don Callis were my original announcers for that. So, um, we our paths across. He was bringing guys in for tryouts for WWF. Would bring me in a bunch and stuff like that. So that's how we got to know each other. And then the podcast came up. I was like, I definitely don't ever want to wrestle again. I have no desire to get in the ring and take a bump, hit the ropes, any of that stuff.
right
I'm too beat up and for all that. But there's something I could give back to the business. I don't want to train people, any of that kind of stuff. So I was talking to Kevin. I'm like, listen, I had this ideal, and I want to see what your thoughts on it. Because I always, even if Kevin wasn't, commentating for me, I'd call him and I'd I'd say, hey, I have a thought. Tell me what you think. And he's like, I love it. It's good. Or he's like, oh, I don't get it. So I could bounce stuff off of him. So I was like, listen, I have this idea. Tell me what your thought is. I'm going to do a podcast. And I know wrestling is a very oversaturated market with podcasts. I said, but let me tell you my thoughts. So when you look at the run sheets, it have all these time codes, and then it would say M&E, which is music and entrance, and then it would say Lex Luger verse, and then say in ring, and then they'd write in whoever they wanted. So Casey Thompson, right?
right
So that's where the name comes from. the enhancement guy who's always in ring. You never got a music and entrance.
Right.
You walked out when the other guy was coming back. You walked out to the ring with the referee. So that's where the name came from. I said, so I want to do a podcast that you use my perception of the business, what I saw through my eyes. And because I was in WCW during the Monday Night Wars.
Right.
Kevin was in WWF during the Monday Night Wars. Like, you remember that Nitro they did at MGM where they made a stadium outside of it. The night Hall and Nash showed up and they threw Hall threw Rey Mysterio in the trailer like a lawn dart, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was standing right behind the camera. I was right behind them. Like, they were here, I was right here. So, and you do the Montreal screw job. Kevin was right there because Bret Hart had the documentary crew Beyond the Mat, and Kevin was helping them, as liaison through the company with them. Kevin was right behind that camera. So we have so many things that coincide with each other, even though our careers weren't right next to each other, but they always intertwine with each other. So we have endless amounts of content, to talk about. And another thing that we like to do is I'm a big proponent on people love to know behind the scenes stuff that they don't normally know. Like, you go to a concert where you want to have a full access pass.
Right.
You want to be behind the scenes where you can see how everything happens, how it all gets put together, how it works. So that's what I do with the podcast too. We did an in-depth episode once on the gorilla position. Back in my day, it was a table, a monitor, and a headset. And Gorilla Monsoon sat there,
right?
Telling your cues to go to the ring. Now it's evolved into almost like a whole production room.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Where they have
the WWE down was like a whole office in there.
Yeah. So we talk about that stuff. We talk about how Vince McMahon would scream at the announcers through the IFBs while they're announcing. We did a lot of stuff that a lot of different podcasts don't talk about. So I told him about all the stuff I wanted to do, and he's like, I said, what I'm looking for is I'm trying to look for a young guy that wants to make it in wrestling as a commentator to do this with me to help. I need someone to keep the flow of the show going.
Right.
He's like, let me think about it, see what I can do. So we got back together a couple weeks later, and he's like, well, actually, he says, I really love the concept. I talked to a couple friends of mine that do podcasts that know wrestling, and they're like, it's very unique. There's nothing else out there like it. So he's like, if you would have me, he said, I would love to be your co-host. I'm like, done. Definitely. I said, why wouldn't I? Kevin's great.
Right.
He can just go on and just boom, turn it on. And our producer goes crazy because we don't do no show prep. We don't talk about anything. And he wants to make thumbnails and get this all. We don't do any of it. We just turn on the mic and say, what are you talking about today? Don't know. We turn on the mic and just go. And so he has to do everything in post to, get all the stuff ready and stuff like that. So it works out great for us. He's like, when you want to start? I'm like, Sunday. He's like, okay. We just turned it on and figured it out how to turn on the recording device. And then now we have a producer, like I was saying, so it makes it much better. But so that's what we do. We go out there, and now we're starting to have guests. We have Sarge, Buddy Lee Parker, on soon as one of our guests. Oh, wow. He was the trainer at the power plant. He trained Goldberg and, all those guys. So he has a lot of unique perspective and stories. So what we do is we take our perspective from the business, from our time, literally in the business, being a part of it, right, and tell everyone about it. So, and because you know what, you might have Lex Luger and Sting. Luger might treat Sting this way, but Luger might treat me a different way.
Right.
So my perspective of Luger might be different than Sting's.
Right.
So that's what we give them. And we don't pull no punches. We tell you exactly the way it is. One episode, he was talking about Tony Khan and AEW, and those people were going crazy. Those people are like a cult, you know.
Right.
You know, Tony can't do wrong, the AEW fans. But we just call it like we seen it through our eyes, our perspective of the wrestling business. So
Absolutely.
it's a lot of fun.
Because as me just being a fan doing a podcast about wrestling, that's just what I do because I enjoy talking about it. That's kind of why I say, you know what, I just want to do this for the fun of it, And I
Yeah.
always enjoy talking to other people within the industry. I don't care who you were in wrestling. Like if you're a manager, you're a referee, you helped set up the ring, you're a cameraman. I would
Right.
love to have a conversation because you all have different viewpoints and experiences of what you've done in wrestling. And I like
Yep.
hearing these stories and learn more and more about it because me not being an athletic specimen at all, could never do it. To go in there and take a bump, and as a kid, obviously I wanted to do it, but bad knees and at a young age, credit that.
Right, right. And it doesn't coincide with each other.
Right, so that kind of killed that dream early. But like, I still watched it every single week. I was like, just trying to absorb as much as I can. That's just how I always was like. So I like enjoyed having
Right.
conversations like this.
Yeah, no, one of the reasons why I decided to do something too was I've had like over, I think, 11 documented concussions,
Right,
so I don't remember everything. So this keeps me breaking the cobwebs in my head, and where I start remembering stuff and talking about it. So till it gets to where it's more therapeutic for me too. It helps me with my memory,
yeah,
remembering things and stuff like that. So, and it works. And Kevin, he's like, my girl's like, man, Kevin almost every episode thanks you for bringing him a part of it. you know, because he really enjoys it and has a good time too. So it's you know, we just have a good time.
right,
We just turn it on, and the day where it becomes a job or it becomes a burden, it'd be our last day.
right.
You know,
And he's the first person wrestler that has told me, or I've heard say that doing podcasting or a YouTube show has been therapeutic to them for their having history of concussion and keeping them sharp. Steven Richards, in
yeah.
fact, on his YouTube channel, has said the same thing. That
Oh, really?
yeah, he has
Yeah,
had concussions though, but like he found himself not losing memory because of the concussion because he's talking about and reliving the memories that he have had and discussing
yep,
it, and it has helped him as well. The same light.
yep, yeah. It's true. Because everyone's like, "Oh, you should write a book." I'm like, I don't remember all this stuff. Now at least if I decide I want to write a book, they can go through and listen to the podcast, and
It's smart.
a writer, and be able to write things down to ask me to, refresh my memory to bring it all back out.
So there's another reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So,
being in
and
the
Kevin, his first question was like, "What do you want to do with this? Do you want to use this to start running shows, get it back in the business?" I'm like, "No, not at all. I have no interest in getting back in the ring." I said, "I just want to do it because I think I have something that might be compelling, might be interesting to some people out there. It's a niche market.
it
What I
is
have to, well, not even me, but what we have to offer from our stories, our perspective, our insight on what we've seen in wrestling and experience. We're giving you a firsthand experience through our eyes."
and that what makes it unique because you
Yeah.
have be able to experience what you experience and be able to share the stories. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I was like, wow, certain podcasts that I listen to is because it's what they offer from an educational standpoint.
Right.
So I don't want
Absolutely.
to take up too much of your time since we're over an hour into this. Um, and
It flew by.
it absolutely did. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up for this episode. Before we do that, I want you to give you the opportunity to, promote your podcast, share it to my audience. Tell me what you got coming up, what you got going on.
Yeah, it's a in-ring wrestling podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then any social media you can reach out to us on. Everything's In Ring Wrestling Podcast from Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. It's all In Ring Wrestling Podcast, and we put stuff up every week. And we just started season 2 today. Today is the big holiday, 316. So,
Steve Austin.
yeah, Steve Austin, Stone Cold Day.
Yep.
So we did a whole episode talking about Stone Cold, from his experiences with Steve, mine, me wrestling Steve, and everything. So yeah, so we put an episode out every week, a bunch of shorts and all that, and just we just go from there. And we're starting to add guests on it, just getting exciting. It's just getting fun, and we know it's a marathon. It's not a sprint,
Right.
So we're grinding it out. We're out there all the time on different podcasts, telling our story to make it entertaining for your show, but also to promote our product and everything.
Absolutely. And so, with that being said, I want to thank you very much, Casey, for being on the show. It was a pleasure having you here and sharing your experiences and stories. Hopefully, maybe one day you'll have you back on here again.
Oh, definitely. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And this concludes episode number 11 for the Rebels by Design Wrestling podcast. And everybody enjoy the show and thank you for listening.